You realize half of that bonus is mine. He said it the way he said most things that mattered, like he'd been sitting on it for a while and had finally decided I deserved to know. Calm, certain. One hand scrolling through his phone, the other reaching for the glass of water I'd poured for myself. I'd driven home that Tuesday evening with the windows down even though it was 40 degrees in Denver, because I needed the cold air on my face to keep from floating away. 4 years. 4 years of 70-hour weeks, of being the person who stayed late and came in early and said yes to every project that scared me. And my director had finally called me into her office that afternoon and slid a paper across the desk. Annual performance bonus, $48,500. Stock vesting accelerated by 18 months. I'd sat in my car in our driveway for 10 minutes just looking at those numbers. My husband was on the couch when I walked in. He'd just gotten back from the gym. Still in his training gear, the expensive kind, the compression, everything he'd started buying. After he read that serious investors dress the part even in their off hours. His gym bag was open on the floor where he'd dropped it. He hadn't showered yet. "Good day?" he asked, not looking up. I set my work bag on the counter. "Actually, yeah, a really good day. I got my performance review results." I paused, waiting. "I got a $48,000 bonus." He looked up then, but not with the expression I'd been imagining on the drive home. Not the smile I'd rehearsed responses to in my head. What crossed his face was something more like calculation. "You realize half of that bonus is mine." I stood there for a moment. The kitchen smelled like nothing, because I'd been at work since 7, and nobody had cooked anything, and the oven had been cold all day. "It's a performance bonus," I said carefully, "from my performance." "We're married." He said it like that ended the conversation. "Marital assets are split 50-50. That's just how it works." I looked at him. This man I'd married 4 years ago. This man who had not congratulated me, had not asked what the bonus was for, had not said anything close to the word proud, just calculated his cut. "Okay," I said. My voice came out steadier than I felt. "If that's how you want to handle it." He nodded, satisfied, and went back to his phone. I went upstairs to change and sat on the edge of the bed for a long time. The room I'd furnished, down to the weighted blanket I'd bought, because he said he slept better with pressure. I sat there until I heard him turn on the TV downstairs, and then I opened my laptop. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for when I pulled up our bank accounts. I think I just needed to see something clearly for once, to look at numbers that couldn't be argued with or reframed or turned into another conversation about the bigger picture. So I started with last month. Then the month before. Then I opened a new spreadsheet and typed a header at the top. 4 years. I worked for 3 hours. The house was quiet except for whatever my husband was watching downstairs. I downloaded statements, pulled credit card histories, sorted by category: mortgage, utilities, groceries, insurance, home and auto, his business expenses, the ones that had started appearing on my visa about 18 months into our marriage, back when he announced he was leaving his marketing job to build a real estate portfolio. The photography sessions for property listings, the subscriptions to investor software he used for maybe 2 weeks each. The conferences in Scottsdale and Nashville he described as networking, but mostly seemed to involve hotel bars and steak dinners charged to my card. The online courses, 3 separate programs, each promising to teach him the secrets of short-term rental success. A combined $800 worth of secrets that had produced nothing. I made a column for what I'd contributed. I made a column for what he had. 4 years, my $291,000. $41,230. His real estate business, the empire he'd been building since he quit his actual job, had earned a combined $9,400 over 4 years. One property, which he'd talked me into helping finance, which had broken even twice and lost money the other 22 months. I sat back and looked at those numbers in the blue light of my screen. 87%. I had been paying 87% of our life together. And tonight he had told me, without flinching, that half of my bonus belonged to him. I saved the file, made 3 copies, cloud email to myself with the subject line evidence just because it felt true. Then I opened a second spreadsheet. This one I labeled domestic operations. I started entering hours, grocery shopping, meal planning, cooking, cleaning, laundry, managing our HOA account, scheduling maintenance, tracking bills. I used a conservative rate, $22 an hour, which was what the cleaning service 2 streets overcharged, and I came up with a weekly figure that stopped my hands on the keyboard. 44 hours a week. Roughly $50,000 a year in unpaid household labor, on top of my salary, on top of my actual job, on top of the projects I stayed up working on at midnight because I cared about doing them well. $50,000 a year that he had never once mentioned, never acknowledged, never offered to offset or share or even notice. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. Text from downstairs. I ordered Thai. I stared at the message for a moment. Ordered with whose card, I thought. Not hungry, I typed back, already ate. I hadn't eaten since noon. I worked for another hour and made decisions. Quietly, the same way I worked through problems at my job. Define the parameters, identify the variables, determine the cleanest path forward. The next morning I woke at 5:30 and made my own coffee. 1 cup in the small pour-over I'd bought myself 2 years ago that my husband had started using because it just tastes better. I took it back. I poured exactly 1 cup and sat at the kitchen table and drank it while it was still hot, which I hadn't done in longer than I could remember because I was always doing something else by the time I'd poured it. He came downstairs at 8:15 expecting breakfast. We'd had a routine. I'd built it without really noticing, the way you build most things in a marriage, incrementally, accommodating, until one day the accommodation is just the structure of your life and you've forgotten you ever made a choice about it. There's cereal, I said without looking up. Eggs in the fridge if you want to cook something. Silence behind me. You're not making anything. We're splitting things 50-50 now, right? I turned and looked at him directly. That starts with breakfast. His jaw did something complicated. He was searching for an argument that wouldn't contradict what he'd said to me 20 hours ago. He came up empty. He grabbed a protein bar from the pantry, the expensive kind I'd been buying in bulk for him for 3 years, and left without another word. I watched his car reverse out of the driveway and felt something settle in my chest. Not peace exactly. Something more like solid ground under my feet for the first time in a while. That afternoon I set up a shared expense tracker and sent him the link with a brief message. Starting this month, household bills are split 50-50. I'll send payment requests as they come in. His half of the mortgage alone was $1,600. His half of everything, utilities, insurance, HOA fees, groceries divided, came to just under $2,400 a month. Before he quit his job, he'd been making $52,000 a year. His real estate business had earned $9,000 in 4 years. I didn't do that math for him because he was a grown adult, and I was done doing things on his behalf. The first Venmo request went out Thursday. Water bill, his half, $94. He called instead of responding. This is ridiculous, he said. It's the water bill. And your half is $94, I said pleasantly. Due by Friday, please. The money arrived Friday morning. No note. Just a transfer that felt like it had been sent through gritted teeth. My coworker Chloe pulled me aside the following Wednesday during lunch. We'd been friends since I joined the company. She was a UX researcher, sharp with numbers and patterns the way certain people just are, the kind of person who notices what others prefer not to look at. Can I ask you something? She said. Sure. Does your husband know you exist outside of your direct deposit? I laughed, but it didn't quite land right. I mean, you just got a $48,000 bonus, she said carefully. And when I asked how you celebrated, you told me you ordered Thai food and ate it alone upstairs. I'm just wondering if he understands that he lives in your house. I didn't answer her. She didn't push. But I thought about it the whole drive home that night, and when I pulled into the garage, I sat in the car for a while before going inside. The hardest part was the thing I kept circling back to in those first 2 weeks. I had let this happen, not passively, not by accident. I had trained him to take me for granted by never asking to be seen. I had made myself invisible and then wondered why nobody was looking. That was the part I didn't know what to do with. The accountability I owed myself for 4 years of quietly absorbing an imbalance I'd been too exhausted, or too afraid of the conversation, to name out loud. His mother called that Sunday. She visited from Phoenix 3 or 4 times a year and had been coming for dinner at our house every trip for 4 years. She'd always called it our tradition. What she meant was my cooking, my table, my wine selection, my cleanup the next morning. Nolan mentioned you're doing that chicken dish, she said. The one with the white wine sauce. I've been thinking about it all week. I held the phone very still. I won't be cooking Sunday, I said. A pause. Excuse me? My husband and I have restructured our household contributions. I kept my voice level, the same tone I used on difficult client calls. Cooking elaborate meals isn't part of the arrangement anymore. You're absolutely welcome to come, but he'll be handling food. Another pause longer than, I see, I'll see you Sunday. She hung up before I could say anything further. That Wednesday evening, I came home to find my husband in the kitchen, with his laptop propped against the backsplash, watching a YouTube tutorial titled, French Chicken for Beginners. He'd pulled out every pot we owned. There was flour on the floor. Something was already darkening in the sauté pan. What are you doing? I asked. Practicing, he said without looking at me. For Sunday. I watched him for a moment. The chicken pieces he'd cut were wildly uneven. The vegetables looked hacked rather than chopped. He'd added the garlic first, directly into hot oil, and it was already starting to brown at the edges. Your garlic is about to burn, I said. I've got it. I went upstairs to change. 8 minutes later, the smoke alarm went off. I came back to find him waving a kitchen towel at the ceiling sensor, while a pan of blackened garlic sent up acrid smoke. You add it after the onions, I said over the alarm. It cooks faster than everything else. He didn't respond, just kept waving. An hour after that, the kitchen looked like the aftermath of something. Every surface had something on it. The sink held 4 pots in various states of disaster. The trash overflowed with multiple failed attempts, scorched chicken, vegetables that had turned to mush, a pot of rice that had welded itself to the bottom. My husband stood in the middle of it, all looking at his phone. I'm calling Francesca's, he said. Francesca's was the Italian place on Larimer that did a Sunday prix-fixe menu, $60 per person minimum, 3 people. That's close to $200, I said. She loves their piccata. I almost said I know. I've ordered her birthday dinner from there twice. Instead, I went back upstairs and read my book. Sunday arrived gray and cold. I was out back raking the garden beds when my neighbor Tara appeared at the fence with her coffee. She was a family law paralegal. She had the specific kind of patience that comes from spending every day watching people realize things they should have seen much earlier. Big lunch today? She asked, glancing toward the house. My mother-in-law is visiting. She looked at me for a moment. You okay? I pulled off one gardening glove. We're restructuring how we handle household finances. Tara pressed her lips together, nodded slowly. How long has the restructuring been overdue? About 4 years, I said. She squeezed the top of the fence post. If you need anything, she said, I'm right here. At 12:45, I came inside to wash my hands. The dining table looked genuinely nice. My husband had set it carefully, used the good placemats, found the candles I kept in the sideboard drawer. I felt something complicated about that. He could do this. He just never had been asked to. His mother arrived at exactly 1. She swept in wearing a cream blouse, and her reading glasses pushed up on her head, kissed him on the cheek, then looked at me with an expression that was carefully neutral. Something smells like it burned earlier, she said. Test run, my husband said quickly. Dinner's from Francesca's, should be here any minute. She looked at the table, then at the kitchen, which still bore faint evidence of the morning's disaster despite his cleanup efforts. Then at me. The delivery arrived 7 minutes later. He plated everything on real dishes, used serving spoons, brought out bread in the basket I kept in the cabinet he'd never opened. We sat down. Conversation was surface level and careful. He talked about a property listing he was considering. She asked about his market research. Neither of them asked about my bonus. Halfway through the meal, his mother asked if she could print something. She had a document to sign before 5. Your home office, she said to me. You have the laser printer, right? Down the hall, I said. Should be ready to go. She was gone less than 5 minutes. When she came back, she was carrying her printed page, but her face was different. Something had shifted behind her eyes. She set the page beside her plate without looking at it. Frances, my husband said. She looked at me instead of him. The whiteboard in your office, she said quietly. I'd put it up 2 weeks earlier when I ran out of spreadsheet space on my screen. I needed to see everything at once. 4 years mapped in 2 colors, blue for mine, red for his. The ratio was visible from the doorway. Yes, I said. Is that your household budget? That's 4 years of financial contributions. I reached back to the sideboard where I'd left the binder, 51 pages organized with colored tabs by year. I slid it across the table to her. If you'd like the documentation. Frances picked it up carefully. She opened to the summary page first. The silence that followed lasted almost a full minute. She turned pages slowly. Bank statements, credit card records, his business expenses, which had their own tab because there were so many of them. The investment software subscriptions, the photographer he'd hired 3 times for listing photos, the 2 conferences, the courses that earned nothing. A separate section for the property itself, what it had cost to finance, what it had earned, what it had lost every month it lost. At the bottom of the summary page, highlighted in yellow, him, 41,230. Frances's hand started to tremble, a fine tremor, barely visible, spreading from her fingers up through her wrist. Nolan, she said quietly, how much has your business earned? He shifted in his chair. Building something takes time. How much? Silence. About $9,400, I said, total, over 4 years. The sound that came out of Frances was not a word. It was older than words. The kind of sound that lives underneath language. The sound of a belief you've held for years cracking straight through. She pressed both hands flat on the table. You let her carry this, she said to her son, not a question. It wasn't like that. The numbers are right there. She pushed the binder toward him. Tell me which one is wrong. He didn't answer. Frances stood up. She took the binder to the kitchen, and we followed her, and she stood in front of the counter where the Francesca's containers were still visible, and she was very still for a moment. Then she opened the refrigerator. I'd been keeping my groceries on the left side. Fresh vegetables in labeled containers. Proteins portioned for the week. Real food organized dated on his side. 2 energy drinks, a pizza box from 4 days ago, a small container of protein powder he'd apparently decided needed refrigeration. Frances closed the refrigerator. She turned to face her son with an expression I had never in 4 years seen her use on him. You told me she overspent, she said. Her voice had gone completely flat, which was worse than shouting. You told me she wasn't good with money. At Christmas you said it. I believed you. I told her to her face that she needed to be more careful. She paused. I told my son's wife, the woman who was paying nearly 90% of their life together, that she needed to be more responsible. Her voice broke on the last word. Not shattered, just fractured, a clean line through something solid. I saw what was happening every time I visited, she continued, her hands pressing the countertop. I saw you cooking, cleaning, managing everything. I complimented you on what a capable woman you were, what a wonderful home you kept. She looked at me, and her eyes were wet. I made your capability into a justification for his uselessness. I made you smaller by praising how well you handled everything, instead of asking why you were handling everything alone, and I am so profoundly sorry. I didn't say anything, I let her words settle. Outside, I could see Tara through the kitchen window. She was standing at the edge of her driveway, not pretending not to notice. Just standing there, quietly, the way someone stands when they've chosen to be a witness. The Petersons from across the street had come out. Old Mr. Garfield, who walked the same route every Sunday afternoon, had stopped on the sidewalk. Frances picked up her purse from the dining chair. She tucked the binder under her arm like evidence she was removing from a scene. I'm going to the hotel, she said to her son. When I come back, if I come back, I need to find that you've done some very serious thinking about what kind of man you actually want to be. She stopped at the front door, turned back to me. Whatever you decide, she said quietly. I'm on your side, I should have been from the beginning. She left. Her car pulled out of the driveway and the street went quiet. My husband and I stood in the kitchen. Through the front window I could see Tara still there, and the Petersons and Mr. Garfield. They'd heard something, they'd stayed. I caught Tara's eye through the glass and she gave me one small nod. You planned this, my husband said finally. His voice was hollow. I documented it, I said. That's different. He looked at me with something close to grief. What do you want from me? I thought about that. Genuinely thought about it, standing in the kitchen I had maintained alone for 4 years. I want you to become someone different, I said. I want to find out if that's actually possible. But I'm not waiting around for you to figure it out. I'm living my life. If you want to be part of it, you have to earn that. Every single day. He had no answer. That was fine. I didn't need one yet. The first bill payment came the next morning. His half of the mortgage, $1,600, transferred without a message. Then utilities. Then groceries. His half, which I knew he had to calculate for the first time in our marriage, because he'd never once tracked what food cost. 3 weeks later, I found a note on the kitchen counter in his handwriting. Canceled the gym membership. Moving to the rec center, $25. Sold the Scottsdale conference materials. First appointment with a financial counselor is Thursday at 4 p.m. No performance, no apology designed to make me responsible for his feelings, just information. Facts, accountability rendered plainly without an audience. I read it twice, folded it, put it in the drawer. 6 months later, on a Sunday, my husband made dinner. Not because his mother was coming, just because it was his turn. We'd been rotating Sundays for 2 months, quietly, after he asked one evening if we could try. The chicken was imperfect but real. He'd clearly practiced, and I knew this because I'd found the small spiral notebook on the counter, where he'd been keeping notes. Frances came at 2. She hugged me first. She brought flowers. We ate together, the 3 of us, at the table he'd set and around food he'd made, and it was not seamless or entirely comfortable, but it was true. He talked about the project management job he'd taken, not real estate, not anything adjacent to the brand he'd been performing for 4 years, just actual work at a construction firm, $42,000 a year with benefits, and how he was finally putting money into our joint account on time, every month, his actual share. After dinner, he did the dishes. Frances and I moved to the living room. "How are you two?" she asked quietly. I thought about it honestly. "Trying," I said. "I'm watching to see if trying is real or just crisis management. We're not fixed, we might not get there." I looked at my hands. "But I'm here because I want to be, not because I can't imagine leaving." Frances nodded. Like that was the healthiest thing she'd heard in a long time. My husband appeared in the doorway, drying his hands on a dish towel. He looked like a man who understood what he had almost destroyed, and was not finished understanding it yet. "Same time next week?" he asked. "Ask me Thursday," I said. I wasn't being cruel. I was just done handing out certainty before it had been earned. I knew what that cost now. I'd spent 4 years learning it. He nodded like he understood. Maybe he did. I was still watching to find out. The whiteboard in my home office still had the numbers on it, blue and red, 4 years mapped in 2 colors. I hadn't erased them, and I didn't plan to, not because I wanted him to keep feeling the weight of them, but because I needed to keep seeing them myself. To remember that I had let this happen too, that I had made myself invisible, and then been surprised that nobody could see me. That the first real thing I'd done for myself in 4 years was agree, with complete calm, to exactly what he asked for. He'd wanted 50-50. He'd gotten it. And in the getting, the truth had finally had enough space to breathe.